Hey guys, it's me. Yeah, I messed up. I mean, I've talked about self-hatred before, and for me it's very prevalent. Not only that, but every time I want to record something, before I record I always feel terrible, unsure. Why is there all this uncertainty? Why can't I just try and see what happens? Why am I always worried? Like, I overthink all the time. I've noticed in the last few days and weeks and months, I'm such an overthinker. And for some reason, it's hard for me to take any action whatsoever. Like, it doesn't come natural. It's almost as if I always needed pressure from the outside to manage to do anything. Because I've been posed so much pressure, so many expectations that nothing comes out of me anymore. It's like lacking a soul, a heart, like so desperately wanting to have passion for anything, and you can never build it because you are empty. Or at least you feel this way. I feel this way. I'm empty. I'm heartless, soulless. There's nothing inside of me. And even if there was, it would be a black, dark heart, filled with liquid, filled with a sticky slime that takes me away my life elixir every day, more and more, and it is as if I would age twice as fast, as if dying early was pre-programmed in my life. And I only know myself as the artist in pain, the deep philosopher. You know, I've always been the outsider my whole life, and it's the only way I can picture myself now. And I think my mind is trying to keep it up, even though I want to play different roles for once in my life. And my brain doesn't get that. It's stuck. It's stuck in this endless loop of having to convince itself that I couldn't do anything out of myself anyways. There's no self to speak of. And every day when I wake up, it's as if I knew nothing. And every time I realize I can't know anything for sure. But then my brain says that since I can't know anything for sure, no action's worth taking because I can't know how it will go. But isn't that the exact reason that we should act? To figure out what happens, to discover. But my brain isn't wired like that, unfortunately. And I think I'm stuck in this idea that it must work first try, that you can't fail, that this idea of perfection, it's everywhere in my mind, and I see it in all the people I know. But what is perfection? Perfection is nothing but stagnation, because it implies the existence of the one right path, as if there could be multiple ways to do things right. as if the path to take wasn't supposed to be different for each and every one. I mean, of course it is. But perfection says otherwise. And yeah, I don't know why it's stuck in my head. I consciously know that the idea of perfection is stupid. That I should allow myself to just experiment and see what happens. To just act at some point. To not overthink. I know I shouldn't have all these bad habits, but my subconscious says differently. My subconscious isn't my friend. It's become my worst enemy. I have become my own worst enemy. And honestly, I really can't deal with my thoughts. I just need some time where I just remove my thoughts. I think of nothing. I always listen to music, but I also realize that I also need times where I just let the thoughts happen. But every time I do let them happen, it's just too much for me. It's overwhelming. And I don't know what to do. My thoughts are a mess. And there's so many impulsive thoughts. They are so strong and so loud. And sometimes I even think these thoughts, sometimes they're so loud that I intuitively think that other people are able to hear that, even though it's obviously not the case. Simply because they're so loud, so pregnant in my mind. And they're just too strong. Sometimes my mind asks itself whether I even have free will if my mind is going around in circles like that. I know there is. I'm very confident. I'm very convinced there is. But not right now. Right now, I've become a slave of my own thoughts. A slave of the people I used to know. Of the people who raised me. The people who judged me. The people who bullied me and mistreated me and hurted me all along. I have become what I dislike the most in other people. I have become the reflection of the people I hate the most. I notice how I'm falling into more and more patterns of my parents and brothers, all of who did not treat me well, which is why I had to move out. It was an emergency. And I have mental health issues since I'm 15, and they are ongoing. I always think at some point, there are always these moments where I think, it's over, I've done it, and then it strikes back. And strikes back stronger than before. And very often, I fall into a phase where I have no perspective. I can't see a future. Where I can only see a present but not the future. Where I lose all my hope in myself, in humanity, in everything. And where my mind reacts by being the exact opposite of worrying about everything. Worrying about so little, about absolutely nothing, that itself becomes worrying again. And I don't know. I know what to do about this. I'm running around in circles here, just like my brain. I'm just saying what there's to say. And really, there's so much resistance from my mind. There's so much fear. In the whole world, most people I have encountered are driven by fear in their lives. And I am falling into the same spiral. The spiral of fear and shame and blame and hate. I know it's not the way, but my mind has chosen it anyways. And I don't know why. And I don't know how to prevent it. It is almost inevitable. It is as if it was impossible for me to ever heal, to ever be sane again after all these terrible things that happened in my life. And I might sound confident at times, but inside, I'm always frightened. And very recently, my brother has visited me, and I really hoped that he would have understanding for me, and instead, all he did was blame me and behave one-to-one the way my parents did. And I felt the fear. I felt the panic. I just wanted him out of my room again as soon as he entered. He always said that it was all my fault. My situation, that I was living like a king and I didn't deserve it. That pursuing what drives me, what I want, what I need, was a sign of being egoistic. He called me an egocentric person. He called me uncaring. He called me all sorts of things. And he fails to see the positive in me. He's jealous, I've heard that among siblings, it's typical to see that they're jealous at each other. It has never ever been the case between me and my brothers until now. Because now that I'm out, they are jealous because they know they aren't alright with their situation in the family either. And they'd wish to go out. But they didn't. And so they're jealous. Instead of trying to do it themselves, instead of seeing inspiration in what I did, they blame me. They push me down. People tend to, instead of lifting other people up, people tend to push them down. And people push others down because it's the easier way to be above them. But it's not the best way. The better way is to lift yourself up and allow yourself to be helped. Helped to help yourself, as I always say. And I really, really wish that anyone out there, anyone who had understanding for it, could actually help me deal with this mental stuff. I don't care what my family thinks anymore. I'm done. I don't want to talk about them ever again. And I really have to hold myself back to not tell you who my brothers online, because I also have the intrusive thought to tell you so that other people would confront them. But ultimately, that's not the way to go. And I'm very honest about my thoughts. I'm very honest about it because I'm no angel. No one is. And we all have this sort of chaotic energy, if you will. This kind of occasionally being naughty. And it can be good at times. For instance, to stand up for yourself, it's very important to be naughty at times. Not in the sense of hurting other people or generally doing bad things, but more in the sense of prioritizing yourself over other people. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you're more important than a million other people because it's you, and sometimes you are the only one who can take care of yourself. And I used to think that the only way I could live, the only reason to live, was to live for other people, to help them, to support them. But the truth is, I matter too. I matter in my life. And you matter in your life as well. We live for our own sake, which doesn't mean not to be helpful, but it does mean that you shouldn't neglect yourself. Like, it means that you shouldn't neglect yourself. And yeah, I see that, I feel that my mind is clearer now that I'm talking. Talking always helps. And many people, they used to tell me that time will heal my wounds. The truth is, time burns them, inflames them, further and further every day. And every day your wounds, they burn more and more. And eventually, they turn into fire. They burn you irreparably at some point. And they crush you. Time cannot heal your wounds. Only you can. And the truth is, there will be times where you can't do it on your own, where you should seek help. Because if our mental health is down, how are we going to help ourselves? We essentially are our brain. At least the brain is the main component of our being, of our existence. And of course there's this thing that some people call it a heart, other people call it a soul. Whatever you call it, it is this immaterial part of us that undeniably exists. Or at least it is useful to assume that it does. But I'm not here to talk about that, at least for now. What I want to talk about is you should be careful who to trust. Doesn't mean you shouldn't trust anyone, like literally, and isolate yourself. Though to be fair, I do feel the urge to isolate myself all the time. Whenever someone talks to me, whenever I speak to human beings, it's hard. It makes me feel bad. Like every conversation feels so bad. And I just want to retreat again. And it's not like I was an introvert or something. In fact, I used to enjoy talking with people. And I mean, if we talk about things that, like, if it's like discussions, I always enjoy it. But for things like, hi, how are you, small talk stuff, like, I can't deal with it. Or also when people keep asking me more and more questions, more and more superficial stuff, it's like, it's not worth my time. And oftentimes I feel this intrusive thought that other people were generally not worth my time, which I can't generalize for each and every person in each and every moment, of course. But apparently that's how my mind ticks. And I don't know about you, but my mental health is getting worse every day. It doesn't seem like it because I do seem more and more confident, but truth is every day I'm being more and more fake. Like, not right now because it's coming deep from my heart, but other than that, very often I notice myself faking. All the time I didn't do it before. Or well, maybe I did in order to survive my family, but that's another story. My point is, I just wish I could live. Like, I don't know why society's had so much pressure to succeed, have money, have the good relations, have other people, and so on and so forth. I don't know why. I don't know why. And they try to force you by saying either you follow this or you die, or you will starve. Like, we've literally built a society where we can't live, like, we can't survive without money. And it's crazy just how sick it makes people. Like, how sick this whole system makes all of us. It's crazy. Like, I just want to be alive. I just want to enjoy my life and do what I feel like whenever I feel like it, and just experience. Like, I don't want to push myself hard, like working for someone else, constantly chasing some success. And there's all this if-then mentality, like, yeah, once I have this career and this money, and once I have my rent, and once I have a good relation, a loved one, and so on and so forth, yeah, then I can be happy. But many people fail to be happy in the process. And it's just crazy. I see it every day. Like, most adults are just overgrown children. They still think that just working hard will move them forward. Like, that's not true. There's something called passion, called being human, called being reasonable about your life. And most people can't do it because they're so afraid that if they do, it might not work and they will starve. So most people really, they're surviving, not being alive. Like, truly. Mentally. And you might have noticed my anti-capitalist undertone here. And yeah, like generally I observe that there's no advantage to having money whatsoever. I mean, look, all it does is categorize people, evaluate people, like giving people value. Like, people are too complex to just be given a numerical value. And it causes all this value system. It causes all this consumerism, all this comparison and status, and it's the root of so many bad things. And we're restricting ourselves with it. I mean, think of politics. Every time decisions fail, just every time a decision is made, but it is deemed unrealistic, like 99% of the time, it's because of money. Because, yeah, that doesn't bring more win than loss. Yeah, it's too expensive to even afford it in the first place, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And all these interests come to play, and all these ideologies, most of which are driven by money. Because most interests are best served with being rich. That's the sad truth of the world. But it doesn't have to be this way. Why are we making ourselves miserable? And it's not just money. When you're a child, for you the classroom is like your whole world. And remember school grades. They aren't any different. Because ultimately all they do is they judge you. And you lose the ability to be your own judge and to reflect yourself on what you did and how well you did. Because other people are judging you and you start pleasing them. You start people pleasing because of these grades. I remember it happened to me. Like, for instance, one of the most obvious examples is art, where at first I had my own style, and I remember like there was a time where we should make like comics, and I was really fixated on one idea that I really wanted to polish. And since the other children weren't like that, they were going from one idea to another because they just work differently. They were experimenting with a broader range of things, whereas I already found my goal. The teacher insisted that I should just pick a different character, and I couldn't, because until I didn't have the idea done and finished, I wouldn't do the next thing. Like, I don't do half things. And that's essentially one of my life slogans. I don't do half things. And neither should you, because half things don't give you anything. They're just a half. That's equivalent to having nothing, honestly. But, well, as I was saying, my point is, that pressure made me essentially completely change the way I approached art. I approached it with all the pressure, and only recently have I realized that art's about passion. It should come from myself. And so I have decided to just go ahead and do it and try and experiment. And so, yeah, that's what school grades can do to you. They can destroy your creativity, your uniqueness. They can destroy everything. You become such a pleaser. You don't do anything for your own sake, but for the sake of other people's judgment. Like, how unhealthy is that? Like, imagine you had a friend and all you did was just agreeing to them on everything they say, even when you really think differently, just because they don't want to be judged negatively. That's essentially what happens with school grades, and with society with money, because as soon as people are poor, they are seen as, people tend to see poor people as like generally worse or less worth, which obviously isn't true. But that is the bias that people gain because of these value systems. And it's really, we live in a prison of values, because ultimately no one benefits from these values. They are made up, they're arbitrary, and all they do is divide us. Like, how are you ever going to expect to have any kind of inclusion if values are inherently discriminating? Because they distinguish between people, they differentiate between people based on specific characteristics which are arbitrarily chosen for the sake of a small portion of people who probably like lived long ago. Like, this is out of date. And I don't know. And honestly, let me say it in the face. Same goes for religion. Like, religion is also just a value system. You value the connection of some higher instance. Like, what do you hope to get from a higher instance? The confidence you can't get from yourself? The hope you can't get from yourself? Or from other people? Are you hoping to get more trust? Like, what do you hope to get? I mean, as long as you don't insist that other people should believe too, because it is a personal thing, an individual thing, one might think that it is alright. But ultimately, all it does, it creates this dependency. The dependency on something that you don't even know whether it exists or not. And I realized that it doesn't matter whether a high instance exists or not, whether we're created by this or that. Because ultimately we are here, we exist. We have to deal with the consequence, not with the cause. And so it is just easy to assume that such a high instant doesn't exist. And also, it motivates people more to act on their own, out of their own heart and spirit and will. That is what I hope to see in the world. That's what I hope to achieve as well. To do things from my own spirit, deeply. I don't want to rely on anyone. I don't want to depend on anyone or anything anymore, because, to be honest, I can't entrust my life to anyone. I can only entrust people certain specific things, but not the outcoming of my life. I mean the outcome, but you know what I mean. And so all of these things, they have all one thing in common, and it's not even closely only like values. Like, comparison is also value. Like, having more than your neighbor, does that make you an inherently better person? No, of course not. Of course not. Like, does owning more stuff, like, or consuming more prestigious stuff, doesn't make you a better person? No, it does not. It does not. The only thing that determines how good of a person you are is how much effort you put in improving yourself every day and in being as human as you can be. Just be human. That is the only measure there can be for how good a person is. And even then, that isn't even correct, at least not quite. The only thing that matters is how much effort you put in. Because if for some reason, for you it is much harder to be human than for someone else, I can't blame the person for that. Because they inherently have it harder. And that is the case for some people. That's just the case. That's just how it is. And everyone has their own difficulties and flaws and challenges. Like, yeah, of course we do. But I won't judge anyone for it. As long as they put their effort in improving every day, in being more and more human every day, and in pursuing what they feel like. And the keyword is being authentic. That is the keyword here. Like, yeah, that's ultimately what we should strive towards. Towards just being ourselves, just giving people what we have to offer. We shouldn't be ashamed of being who we are, because it inevitably contributes to our society, because any society is as good as it is diverse, and only as good as it allows for the diversity to be unfold. And I see the tendency of people wanting other people to be similar to themselves. And that's not the way to go, because we need to complement each other. And that is not possible if we all are the same. And not being the same does not mean not having the same worth or anything like that. There exists no such implication. All it means to not be the same is to just differ in terms of our characteristics, in our perspective, in our point of view, in the general energy we give off, or whatever you want to call it. It's just the difference is not a matter of any measurement. It's just a fact. It's just a fact that people differ. And we have to deal with it. We should embrace it. And for instance, let's just consider the case of people who are disabled. So people who are disabled, why are they considered disabled? Because they struggle with the world around them, given their circumstances. But then you have to wonder, is it only on them, or isn't it on the world we have created? Because shouldn't the world we create be created in a way that it fits everyone with no exception? Because it should. The truth is, we make them disabled to our world. It is not that they are inherently disabled. They simply have different struggles and different conditions. And there is no bad diversity, because knowing their struggle and having gone through it, they have a special kind of strength and resilience. And so there is no bad diversity. Because people with challenges, they tend to show more resilience towards crises and struggles that come in the future. And they tend to be more understanding for big struggles, because they have lived through it. Doesn't mean that not everyone can be understanding for other people, but it comes natural to them. But I'm digressing. The point is, instead of blaming or labeling other people for having certain disabilities, maybe we should turn them from disabled to abled by changing the world and adapting it to the diversity of people we have. That should be the approach. Too many people look at the superficial level of what's going wrong in a specific scenario. I look at the bigger picture. Which patterns emerge in the course of the problems that emerge? How can we address problems more effectively? Well, by going to the root that the problems share. And this is what my philosophical approach is all about. It's about finding these patterns and offering solutions. That is what I do. And this is also where a lot of psychology comes into play. Yeah, I know that's a lot to take in. Like, honestly, I allow it to take a deep breath. Breathe with me. And one last one. Yeah? You feel relieved? And you feel like you can take it better in now? Yeah. I mean, look, there's generally a lot of change in mindset that we generally need. And actually, let me introduce my philosophical argumentation and chain of arguments. The first question is, what does it mean to be human? And what are its immediate consequences, implications, to be more precise? Well, it's very simple. Number one, oftentimes there are multiple right ways to go. I call it the principle of plurality. Then there is the principle of diversity, which, by the way, comes simply from the fact that we are all born different, and there's no reason that we should make each other more the same. And as I've explained to you previously, we need to complement each other. And then, of course, there is also, very importantly, the principle of equity, which is important. And it comes simply from the fact that there is no rational reason for some people to have privileges over others. It's all just artificial and arbitrary. Like, money didn't exist since the Big Bang. Let me just put it this way. And so, ultimately, all these differences in worth and value, it's an illusion. And it's a restriction we impose onto ourselves for no reason whatsoever. And a core principle is also to always question your own limiting beliefs. And the thing is, you might be wondering, where do we have our beliefs from? And the answer is simple. From other people who have beliefs as well, from the ones before us. But they must have some before them, and infinitely far, you might argue. And that is true. But there's also a second factor, which is experimenting. We sometimes experiment with values. And at some point, we get so fascinated by the idea of that value because it sounds so great. And then by the point we notice that it isn't doing what it's supposed to do, there are already people who are stuck in a mindset, in a belief that they will perpetuate on and on and on. And these are the two ways that beliefs are spread. But how come that they managed to spread in the first place? I mean, for someone to obtain a belief, unfortunately, there must be like some process, like some psychological process in the mind of that person, such that that person just absorbs the belief. And fear not, there is an explanation. And the explanation is simple. It's the theory of projection. The idea is simple. When we have an urge to socialize and to survive, and if we are given the pressure to pursue certain value over and over and over and over again, and maybe we don't know any better because we're only given that one perspective, then we absorb the belief because we assume it must be true, when it isn't the case. Like as a bystander, you would know that it's obviously not the case. Like, for instance, I used to believe that since my parents were my parents, they were always right. And obviously that's not the case, but still, I used to believe that. Why? Because they pressured me to do so. And projection can come in many ways. It can come in the form of oppression and the form of hierarchies and authority. It can come in the form of manipulation as well. And it can come in all sorts. And at some point, our mind is so convinced of the belief that even when we try to let go of it, a part of our brain still says, but it must be the case. And it insists and insists. And this is where self-projection occurs, where the idea is projected onto the person itself over and over and over and over and over again, simply because people are stuck with it. And yeah, what is there to say? You might have heard of the term status quo, and that is essentially synonymous to the prison of values, to value systems. It's essentially equivalent, just for you to keep in mind. And also, I've noticed that relations between people, very many of them, they are based on dependency and not on true care for one another. For instance, and again I take my parents, they have made themselves independent from financially dependent from one another, to make sure that they would never even get to the idea of how do you say to divorce. Yeah, that was the word. So they wanted to never ever divorce, because they had a common goal in their mind to project their beliefs onto us children. They had common ideas when it came to how a child is supposedly supposed to be raised. And since both agreed in that sense, but they also disagreed in basically everything else, they have decided to make themselves dependent from one another. And that's just not healthy. This is what I see with many people. And many people approach relations with the idea that they were not whole and they need to complete themselves with the other person. First of all, as soon as you think like this, you will tend to be manipulative. Maybe not maliciously, but you will be. You will tend to be. Because that is in the nature of that idea, of that premise that you approach relations with. And then, when two people meet and say they are both like that, then they try to complete themselves with the other person. And they always fear to lose each other, because as soon as they lose each other, they're back to not being complete anymore. And so ultimately it causes dependency, this fear. And again, our modern society is based on fear. Authority is based on fear, laws. The only reason that laws work is that people are afraid of being criminal, or being seen negatively by status, and also afraid of losing their freedom of movement and action. And ultimately, I have the clear position that when you ask law, ethics, I will say ethics. Because the existence of laws implies an authority, but as soon as you have an authority, you inevitably have a value system that determines who is a part of the authority and who isn't. And I've already talked about how dangerous value systems are. And so, as a conclusion, ethics is the way to go. Instead of assuming that people are born evil and must be tamed to become good, which is also how my parents approached my upbringing, we should start to think the other way around, that people are born good. We can rely on that, and that we must make sure that no bad influences turn them the other way around. That is the true way to go. Because no one is born being malicious. And I have strong evidence from my own experience that people are naturally good and they turn bad. I've seen that kind of madness back when I was bullied, 5th through 7th grade. At that time, a few people started off making fun of me and most of the others, well, they were either defending me a little or being bystanders. But over time, they drove mad. They drove into madness, and they started to do the same thing. They started to copy the behavior of the bad people because they had the stronger character, which, by the way, compares very well to the relation between my two parents. My father always used to please my mother because because my mother had such a strong personality. She was hysterical and hyper energetic and super sensitive, and generally there was all this, how do you call it? Yeah, she was temperamental, to say the least. And yeah, just for comparison. But my point is, people turn bad because either other people are bad, and the people who then become bad, they don't know any better. They can judge whether it's good or not because their view will be skewed. Because either they don't have sufficient reference to properly determine whether it's good or not, or they might also don't not really care about it out of survival. And many people also become bad because they aren't taken seriously, when their problems, many people, they become resentful and vengeful as soon as something catastrophic happens in their lives and no one helps them. No one helps them out. People start falling in rage and jealousy and much more. They fall into a spiral of bad behavior. And that doesn't make them inherently bad people, because all that happened was that they were misunderstood. Or maybe they were ignored, which would be bad on the behalf of the people who did. But either way, that person isn't inherently bad. They can find their way back. And the whole point of this is that we should, where was I? I was talking about relations. So let's just take a different example. Let's just assume that two people meet with a completely different mindset. One of them, what am I talking about? Both of them, they feel complete by themselves. And they casually meet, and they line up very well. And they decide to, meet more and more often, and, just the usual when it comes to getting to know someone. And then, yes, they feel happy about their relation, but they also would be good off without each other. It would hurt a bit, but you still have yourself. And it's really, really important that we cultivate these kind of relations, because they're not based on dependency. They're based on care and love and respect and whatnot. And whatever you might call these traits, these positive traits. Now, I just noticed we hitting the 1 hour barrier, so let's take another deep breath. And this time, breathe very, very, very deeply, okay? Ready? Oh my, I'm coughing a lot recently. Yeah, anyways. You might have noticed that being in a good relation with yourself, that almost sounds as if you were a different person to yourself. And it's just the same, it's just the same as when we talk about ourselves and about our mind as if it was a separate instance from us. And so let me bring up a catchphrase. Yourself is an other. What could I mean by this? I must admit, quite confusing sentence. Well, it is actually very simple, especially if you read it several times. It states none other than the fact that we should treat ourselves the way we would treat other people. Usually, the paradigm goes the other way around, saying that we should treat other people the way we treat ourselves. But the truth is, if you have a poor mental health, the main problem you have isn't how you treat other people, but it is how you treat yourself. And so, when you have a bad mental health, or also when you're in a crisis or in general, when you struggle a bit with yourself, like it doesn't have to be like super bad mental health either. It could be just a small phase. Then it's important to remember to switch the paradigm, to switch the perspective and tell yourself that you should treat yourself the way you would treat other people. And it works especially if you're well aware that you treat other people kindly and well and, all positive. And I just want this to sit because this is actually one of the most crucial points of all stuff that I will talk about regarding this broader topic of mental health and society and stuff. This is one of the main points. It's this perspective shift. And what I also suggest is that you start building yourself a habit. May you have poor mental health or not, build yourself the habit of always questioning what you appear to know. Question it, always. And it might sound like a lot of effort, but if you do it regularly, you can integrate it very well into moments where you would otherwise be bored or be doing tedious stuff. You can use that time productively by questioning your beliefs, which is another of my main points, if not the main point of them all, of what I'm going to mention regarding this topic ever. So let it sit. Now, what else is there to talk about? I've talked about relations and status quo and Oh, I think I should go a bit more in depth on perfection. The concept of perfection. The concept of perfection implies that there exists just one right way to do things, which immediately contradicts the very first principle I've set, which we know is true because each one of us is different, we work differently, and sometimes what works for one person won't work for the other. Like, if you know one person, you know just that one person. So, yeah. Perfection, as I have said previously, is nothing but stagnation. And it's stagnation in the sense that we limit ourselves to seeing just one right way, or at least seemingly one right way, or at least one seemingly right way. And in case all of these sound kind of the same, they have different emphases. Let it sink. But my point is that the concept of perfection is really, really dangerous. And never, ever, ever should you even think of it. Ever. I'm not joking. And another major point, because I have scrapped a bit the surface of the political part of my philosophy. Let's talk about power. What is power? Well, power, I need to distinguish actually between two words, just so we're on the same page. So, I distinguish between power and actionability. Actionability is, as the name suggests, simply the ability to act based on your own decision. And then there's power, and power is the ability to control other people. That is power, how I define it at least. And trying to control, you might be wondering, why would someone try to control someone else? To feel powerful? Well, that would be a cycle in our argumentation. Or perhaps they just do it for the sake of it, or because it's fun in their eyes. No. It goes deeper than that. But nonetheless, it is simple. People want power because they want control over the circumstances, which by itself isn't wrong. But ultimately, trying to control other people is where things get dangerous. And the only reason that someone would ever want to control someone else is that they can't control themselves and their lives. They need anything outside of themselves to control. Anyone in power is secretly insecure about themselves. That is straight to the point. Let it sink. Just let it sink. And also, I have mentioned, on the other hand, actionability. And might be wondering, well, this acting freely, that almost sounds like anarchy, but that would be just too chaotic and, And this is not the way I mean it. Look, the way I mean it is that within the ethical constraints which result directly from the immediate implication of us being human. You can do anything you want. Why? Because it doesn't contradict anything by ethic. It doesn't contradict anything in the ethic that I am establishing, simply out of what falls immediately from being human, which I think is the most reasonable basis from which you can create a human ethic. And so, let me just talk about actionability in depth. Actionability is needed because of one simple thing of our psyche. We cannot make ourselves independent from our outer circumstances. It means we will forever worry about the outer circumstances. We will always look at it. We will always take things from it. We can't ignore it, even if we wanted to. At no moment can we ignore it. And so, this raises the question, but how then can we be free? Good question. The answer is simple. If we can't make ourselves independent from our outer circumstances, then at least we must be able to shape them before they mold us. That is it in a nutshell. What I mean by that is that in order to be free, we need to be able to shape the very thing that our brain constantly pays attention to, which is our surroundings, which by itself isn't a flaw. I mean, it's great. It allows for communication. It allows for so many things that are great. But it must be enjoyed in portions, in small portions. And this is how you do it, by being actionable. We must allow all people to be actionable. Now, you might be wondering, yeah, but people are pretty free in their countries, right? Well, first of all, not all countries are free, not even on paper. And secondly, even if they were on paper, remember what I said about social values and the projection. Do you call it freedom when an ideology is pumped into all people, like from the get-go? That isn't really freedom anymore. That's just like, at this point, freedom is just a word that it's kind of abused in the context. Really, yeah, all that, wait, what was I saying? Oh, yes, sorry, I just lost, yeah, whatever. So we were talking about, come on, I forgot it again. You see, my mind isn't quite alright. It's very forgetful. I'm very forgetful recently. And that's, with no coincidence, it's ever since I have my bad mental health, I'm also much more forgetful than basically ever before, which is very impractical for me. Yeah. What I was talking about was, yeah, countries and freedom, exactly, okay. So, we aren't free if we are forced to work to survive, if we have if we're supposed to conform in order to be seen better, not to have a better image. And many people focus so much on their image that they forget about their morality. They forget about being human entirely. Like, they forget about it. For them, for many people, it's a second priority. It's, yeah, my image goes first, and even if I go over dead bodies, yeah, my image is great. Rather than saying, most important thing is that I do what is right, and even if people don't agree with that, I know for myself that I did the right thing. And the reason we can't do that anymore is, again, poor mental health. But what kind of poor mental health? Well, the lack of self-certainty, of self-certainty, in the sense that we are never sure, we are indecisive, we don't trust our own perception, and we think that our perception was invalid. And this happens. This does happen to a lot of people. And for a long time, I probably mentioned it before, but I was diagnosed with the Asperger syndrome, and my family always treated it as an excuse to treat me as if my perspective on things didn't matter, because yeah, you have this diagnosis, and yeah, you aren't alright in your mind anyways, and yeah, it's better if you trust us blindly. And because I didn't know better, I was like, yeah, okay. And I lost the ability to trust myself, my own perception, my own feelings. I didn't take my feelings seriously. I used to be someone who thought that rationality meant to ignore feelings. Now I know this isn't true, because the fact is, our emotions exist. They are telling us something. They are a signal of our mind. They are there. They are real. Emotions are real. I can't say it often enough. Your feelings are real and valid. Please let it sink. But anyways, I used to think that repressing all the emotions, ignoring them, was the best way to go. Now I know it's not the case. Instead, you should take a look at your emotions. It doesn't mean to act purely out of your emotions, because that isn't right either. It's about finding the balance between the facts according to your own perception and according to other people's perception. That is the information you get from what other people tell you, and you must balance that and your emotions, because your emotions are derived from your instinct, from your intuition. And your intuition is an extremely valuable part of your sensations. It's crucial. Intuition is more often than not perfectly right about your situation. I mean, it's a bit like a miracle, because the intuition is a result of the subconscious. And you might think that, yeah, the conscious knows all the stuff. But no. We are only conscious of the things that appear the most important at first. But the subconscious is always pointing out, yeah, but don't forget about this. And that's what we call intuition. It's the signal that we might be ignoring something that is crucial at the moment. And so, yeah, this is where um, all I can point out is that we need to start to trust ourselves again. But probably just as important, we should also start to trust each other. I mean, different people, we should just trust each other, because I know that we live in an age of distrust, of general distrust. And I also know that this is very unhealthy. And so you might be wondering, how are we ever going to cultivate, how are we ever going to cultivate trust again? Like, ever? And that's a good question. And let me answer it real quick. It's actually much simpler than it might seem at first. Go approach someone, and whenever you get the sensation of distrust, ask yourself, why don't you trust that person? And there might be moments where you are rightfully distrusting the other person, but ask yourself first. That is the crucial part. That is the point I want to go to. Don't let yourself be driven purely by the feeling of distrust. But instead, ask yourself first, how trustworthy is the person? And again, don't look for the answer that comes from your intuition in this case, but rather from more the rational, from more the cognitive side of things. Yeah, that is a part of having this balance. And also, let me talk about one more very important thing. Let me talk about the difference between intention and motivation. So, just so we're on the same page, I define intention to be what you do something for, and the motivation as the driver of what you're doing. And so the motivation has an inherently intrinsic character, whereas intention, generally has an extrinsic characteristic. And so the question is, how should we act? And the answer is simple. Only act in a certain way for the sake of that action. This way, you stay in the present. But more importantly, you don't even get into the temptation of using other people as a means to your goals, which is what I see very often. Like, imagine it's the first time you go to some company and you're there, and the boss for some reason comes late because they were busy maybe or something. But anyway, as they approach, you open them the door, and there are two options. Either you do it for sake of making a good impression towards your boss, in which case there exists an intention, and in which case in this context, it's pretty obvious that that is kind of manipulation. And manipulation, by the way, is a much wider set of behaviors than many people think. It's not just the kind of manipulation of people making people harm themselves. It encapsulates much more than that. Just saying. Or there's also the option of you're just generally kind to people. And the later one has nothing malicious behind it. There's no egocentrism behind it. There is there's just no intention behind it. There's there can be trust in that action. And the difference between action out of motivation and out of intention is that when it comes out of motivation, it is unconditional. But when it is intentional, then it is also conditional. Now, what does it mean for actions to be conditional? It means that you can't rely on it happening consistently. That is a catastrophe for the simple reason that if an action is done due to a certain condition, say in my example, the condition is that your boss will like you more, or at least that's your hope then from that intentional act. And then, what was I saying? Yeah, so you do this intentional act once, but how can you be sure whether the person will do it next time? Maybe if the person no longer sees an advantage in opening the door to their boss, they won't be kind enough to do it. I mean, this is just a silly example. There are examples that are much more serious than just opening a door, but I think it's easy to imagine, so I decided to pick that. But there are much more serious instances of that is much more serious scenarios to consider than just opening doors or something like that. There are serious implications of not being able to rely on someone because their actions are conditional. It creates the general distrust that I've talked about, that I've just mentioned. And yeah, that's honestly, it's just very sad to see all things that I've talked about just not being present at all. Honestly, why did I talk so long? Because I felt like it. I felt like putting out my emotions and my thoughts out there onto the world. And in case you're interested more in my philosophical argumentation, just ask me for it, and I can give you more detailed argumentation. But I haven't left out anything relevant. Maybe the one or the other detail, but I'll leave it up to you whether you need to hear the details or not. And the reason that I'm making this is that I felt terribly. I felt terribly recently, and I'll just go right back to the beginning. There's all this self-hatred in me still. and all these expectations and all this everything. That's so much conditioning from 70 years, not 70, 17, but still too long. From 17 years of bad parenting, I've come out like this, mentally broken. And school didn't make it any better. And the relations I had didn't make it any better because most of them ended up terribly. Like, there were people who just were blatantly traitors to me. Like, they blatantly betrayed me. And there were also people that unfortunately never managed to maintain contact with because I don't know, because it just didn't occur. It just didn't ever happen. I'm happy that now, in the recent few months, I've gained many friends that I am sure I will be able to keep. And I am very happy also that that my physical health is at least improving. And in that regard, I need to give you some context. I have been underweight my whole life. I am to this day. And let me just put it this way. I had some very critical scenarios, like the lowest BMI that was ever measured on me was 11.8, which was around the age of 9 or 10, which is a BMI where some people already struggle to survive. I luckily didn't, but it was still not healthy. And recently I received the highest BMI I ever had, a 15.2, which I'm very proud of, since I have heavily increased it from a 14 point something. And I also noticed that now that I'm no longer under stress on my family, I find it easier to gain weight now, which I desperately need. And in that regard, my physical health is also improving. And what does it mean also improving? My mental health, I have... Pardon me. I've just said that previously that my mental health was going downhill. It's not as simple as that. Some aspect of my mental health, such as my suicidal thoughts or the signs of total depression, they are vanishing. Like, they're almost completely gone. And I'm very happy that they are. I'm very happy that I'm over it now. And it also goes to show just how correlated mental health and physical health are. So, if you're struggling with physical health, chances are you might also be struggling with mental health, and vice versa. So, beware. There are a lot of connections between these two kinds of health. In fact, really, they are just one thing. They are health. And honestly, this distinction between mental health and physical health leads many people, unfortunately, to strictly prioritize physical health over mental health, when really both are very important. And so, yeah, I just want to let you know that at least there's some good news in my life. And I I want to give huge shout outs to Dakus9254 for helping me out a lot recently. He's given me a lot of hints on how to approach talking about these kind of topics on YouTube, and he's also listened to my story, and um he also had his mental health stuff, which I mean it's no surprise, it's widespread now in the recent years, so no surprise there. And also I like to thank him for allowing me to create his server with him, and for letting me enter the development team of Pumpkit 3, which is a game that we're working on. Is the third installment of Dakus's Pumpkit series, and it's going to be released on Halloween 2025. So just saying. And I also like to thank to many people who I have to keep anonymous for opening my eyes. Like there were many people in my life who have really opened my eyes in the recent 2 years where I was struggling, and I no longer feel ashamed of my bad mental health, which by the way also used to be the case. Back when I was 15 especially, it was terrible for me. I was totally ashamed. Like, I didn't talk about it because I was afraid if I talked about it, people would start bullying me for it. Because, and here's another very important topic that I need to address. Not only are people afraid, live in fear. They especially live in fear of being vulnerable. People hate being vulnerable because as soon as they are vulnerable, they can be attacked. But here's the underlying assumption that people will go ahead to attack them in the first place, which is only possible if these people have no moral whatsoever. And so that fear reflects the lack of ethics that we have in the world. There's so much distrust. And I mean, this fear of vulnerability has shown itself in me also in a kind of paranoia that I used to have. Like when I was in the street, I was constantly looking backwards to make sure that no one would run from behind to attack me, because I was that paranoid at the time. That reached its peak when I freshly turned 17. It reached its peak, and it was terrible. It was like my neck literally suffered from that because I was looking so often to the back that it wasn't healthy for my body. And this fear of being vulnerable also shows this aim for perfection, this aim for strength. But ultimately, strength is also nothing but a limiting belief. I mean, what is strength? What is weakness? What is that? Like, what is that? Seriously, what does it mean to be strong or weak? It can mean all kinds of things. So why bother? Why bother being strong or weak? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but there is no clear way to define these words. And really, they resemble just how afraid we are of being vulnerable. Again, I don't know how often I said that already. So anyways, let me now continue my shout out. I would also, I would especially like to thank the people here in the living group that I am in. In Germany, it's called Wohngruppe. I huge thanks to the people who work there for supporting me, helping me, and for being there when it's needed. It's not often, but the few times where it is the case, it's very helpful. And I also find the other people who are in there, to be very kind, respecting, and tolerant, which is great. And um, yeah. What else is there to say? Let me just think for a second. Yeah, so I would also like to thank a lot to actually let me talk about that in the future. That would require a bit more of background knowledge, and no, actually, you know what, let me do it right now. I would like to thank especially the two boys who randomly noticed that someone was off with me, and they informed me about the option that exists here in Germany to go to a living group, as is the literal translation of Wohngruppe, and they have offered me to all stand by my side, as I could stand up for myself. Honestly, I couldn't do that. I didn't have the courage. So they did it for me essentially, and it worked. And like, thanks to these two people who I cannot mention anything else about due to privacy. I thank these two a lot for allowing me to distance myself from my family, which has been very problematic from the start and continues to be, as shows the way that my brother showed up recently when he visited me here. And actually, I also told the people who work here that he should please never come visit me ever again. I told them very clearly. And also, I don't care if my family sees this, because I do my thing. They can't do anything against me. They can't do anything about me. they are powerless. I won't let them restrict the topics that I talk about, because that would be bowing before them. I will not do that. I will do my thing, as I always do. And you can rest assured that more videos of this type are going to come. And excuse me. Actually, I must be very honest. This part is directed to the people in the Pumpkin 3 development group. I'm very honest. A lot of my contributions, especially to the storyline, had been heavily inspired by the struggles I had in my own life. And whenever I create stories, like, the characters resemble a part of me when in the times where I struggled. And just so you know where my ideas come from. They are not really that original. They come from my own life. And I was just, you could consider it smart enough from me that I could just make use of these ideas for that game. But what you think of it is up to you. And if you have more questions on mental health, on the downfall of society, or on anything else, then ask me. Feel free to ask me. Feel free to comment. And I will talk about AI at some point as well, but that would really blow up this video's length, so I will move that to another day. And it deserves a video of its own. Absolutely does, because it's a really complicated topic. So the last thing I want to tell you is, don't judge people for their bad mental health. Please, do not. Getting mental health can sometimes be like catching a cold, or like suddenly getting a fever. It can come and go, and sometimes it can also be chronic, just like physical health. Sometimes, sometimes brain fog can be like a cough, and intrusive thoughts can be like a fever, and chronic negative thinking can be like cancer. Like, mental health is to be taken seriously. And do not blame people for their mental health. No one enjoys being mentally ill. Let me clarify that. No one does. Ever. Like, if you really think that people put themselves into these situations, then you're not to be helped anymore. You cannot be helped anymore. So, no, sorry for this. Actually, sorry for this phrasing. It might have come off as very aggressive. It's just my type of sarcasm. Like, yeah, excuse me if that came off as rude. But, yeah, please. Again, I can say it often enough, take mental health seriously. Take care of yourself. Your health goes before everything else. Even before your career, even before your relations, it goes before everything. Your health goes first. Because without your health, everything else crumbles. Like, please, take care. Be careful. And be careful with people you're around. Be careful what beliefs you keep within your mind. Best case scenario, get rid of all of them. And most importantly, share this video with anyone who deals with mental health issues, even people with physical health issues, or really anyone can need this, because bad mental health can come when you least expect it. So go and share it to the world, because like I don't want to be like the guy who says that I do the best videos or something, or I'm like completely 100% right with what I'm saying or something, but this video is one more perspective on mental health and also a bit of physical health. So it is worth being shared to people who need additional perspective, who need to see that there are alternatives, that there are options, that their lives and how they go aren't hopeless, that they aren't lost cases. I used to feel like a lost case too, but I am starting to survive less and less and live more and more. I'm trying, I'm doing my best every day. And so should you. Do the best you can. And I am sure that you can go a long way. As we say in German, ich drücke euch die Daumen. Fingers crossed, we would say in English. So I don't know why do you keep talking? I should just finish this video already, alright? It's hard to come to an end. Just like it's hard to imagine the end of my poor mental health. It's really hard to imagine. I know that I used to be mentally healthy, but it feels as if I would have always been mentally ill. For some reason, it's so much time passed already. And yeah, I don't know, it was just so long. And I know that I'm not the only one who had this for this long. I know that. And I just want to note one more thing. Some of the aspects of this video might sound familiar from a few other channels. And that is likely because I took inspiration from a few channels that discuss the topic of mental health. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise to you. And so before you come and say that I copy ideas, I'm not copying, I'm being inspired, and I do give all these ideas my own twist. So you can't complain. Yeah, let me just finish this already, right? Bye, cheers, and I wish you the best. Peace.